The boring thing, if you can please turn off your phones or at least put them on vibrate before we get started. First, I'd like to thank Leslie and Aaron Pompey, who are helping us record the event tonight, and we were able to schedule the event here so we can have it recorded, so thank you very much. Gary Stephan was born in Brooklyn. He went to school at Parsons, the Art Students League, and Pratt, all in New York. Sorry, I've been running up and down the stairs. He received his MFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and currently lives and works in New York. Gary has had solo exhibitions at Devening Projects and editions in Chicago, Galeria Kleindl and Gemeiner in Berlin, Cynthia Brown Gallery in New York, Baumgartner Gallery in New York, a 10-year survey at the Butler Institute in Youngstown, Ohio, Revolution Gallery in Detroit, Galeria Fernando Alcolea in Barcelona, Spain, Galeria Siboney in Santander, Spain, Mary Boone Gallery in New York, Margot Levin Gallery in Los Angeles, Marlborough Gallery in New York, the Hans Neuendorf Gallery in Cologne, Germany, and numerous other locations. His group exhibitions have included the Center for Contemporary Art, in Bedminster, New Jersey, Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, Feature Gallery in New York, W139 in Amsterdam, Gallery Thomas Flor in Dusseldorf, the American Academy of Arts and Letters in New York, Galeria Siboney in Spain, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Miami, Florida, the Drawing Center in New York, Galeria Thaddeus Ropac in Paris, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Museum of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, amongst numerous others. His work has been written about by the New York Times, Art in America, Art Magazine, Newsweek, Art Forum, Art Issues, Tema Celeste, Flash Art, The Village Voice, Vanity Fair, Vogue, the Los Angeles Times, and a number of other publications. He has received fellowships from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the New York Arts Foundation. His work is in the collections of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Miami, the Museum of Modern Art, the Guggenheim Museum, and last but not least, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, amongst numerous others. Currently, he teaches at the School of Visual Arts in New York, but tonight we're lucky enough to have him here with us. So please join me in welcoming Gary Stephan.
Me? Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Laura. I just saw my professional life flash before my eyes there. That's great. All right, what I want to do is this, if anyone wants a chronology, then you should go to my website. There's a great chronology on the website. But what I wanted to do tonight was just take you through some ways that I've looked at things and then take you into the studio a little, take you into making things. Could we cut the lights down a little? I'd love to see the audience a little more, if we could do that. Great, thanks. Okay, so this first one is something I noticed when I was in Assisi. I went there to look at these giottos, these frescoes, Life of St. Francis, and something caught my eye, which was, I got to get used to this thing. That's slide advance. Here's what I want, the laser. Is that this little part in the ground above him, which is reproed here, and his backlit foot there, they fit into each other. Now, I remember a student of mine said, I was pointing this out, and they said, I don't think Giotto knew that. And I said, so what? I know it. So that's the difference between the official take on things and then making a reading out of it. You have to, it seems to me that when you look through the world, you have to take possession of it and do once you get the official story, then you have to make a reading out of it. So this is another similar observation. This is Albert Pinkham Ryder, two of his paintings. This is the painter that Jackson Pollock said was the most interesting American painter, which I'm inclined to agree, of the 19th century. And the thing I loved about this, I still don't have this, excuse me. I want my laser again, just a minute. Okay. Is that the attitude of the saint and this tree are surprisingly close. Again, I'm not so sure that Albert Pinkham Ryder thought about this, but he got certain ingrained ways of doing things, and they would show up over and over. And you could almost say that one of the criterias, needn't be, but it can be, a criteria for the style in art, is that somebody just does things a lot. And after a while, that's the signature. That's what the work is about. And this is a Titian painting called Sacred and Profane Love, which is not Titian's title, but it is what came to be called. But the thing I like about this painting, in particular, was the little angel, or whatever he is in the middle, so involved in the dark water down in there. And what I want to point out is that there's this stone box that he's looking into, and that he's also looking into something. Because here's another Titian. This is the one that Manet used to prepare for Olympia. And if you look in the back, there's a woman looking in a box. So this is like two Titians, two boxes, people looking in them. And what's interesting to me about this, I don't think there are any, there's two more you'll say. I don't think there are any other group of paintings where the artist has used boxes so consistently as a formal device. So here's another one. This is also one that Manet used. He used this to do the luncheon on the grass. And there's the woman with another one of those boxes. And I've compared them. They're not the same. And here's the final deposition of Christ, and he's being put in that box. So, like I said, I'm not so sure that Titian thought to himself, I have a motif going here of boxes. But I thought it was interesting that there was this reoccurring theme. Now, this is one of my favorite Bruegel paintings. The thing that's so amazing about this painting, I think I'm going to be able to tell you about. First of all, let me digress. There's a category that interests me a lot called visual meaning. A lot of art needs to get unpacked because you need special information. The thing that's really interesting about this painting, if my reading of it is right, is that it's all of the information you need to unpack this picture is in the picture. So anybody could get this right. And the only caveat to this is somebody who grew up in a really hot climate and had no access to photography wouldn't understand what the ice was. So given that, the painting is called The Bird Trap, and over here is the bird trap. It's one of those kind of things like in a cartoon. It's a board with a stick and a string, and it goes up to a little hole in the corner of the painting right there. The thing I noticed about this painting was that almost all of the birds are on this side of the painting. This is all birds over here. There's two on that side. And on this side of the painting is almost all people. And there's no people on this side, unless you count the person with the bird trap in here. But the most interesting thing, and this is the visual meaning part that I think is kind of curious, if I'm right about this, is that right in the middle of this painting, right there, for that one moment, the birds and the people are the same size. And I think that's what suggests that the way I'm reading this painting is correct. And if I am reading it correctly, then the underlying meaning, which is, I'll tell you in a moment, it's always been suggested that Bruegel was an atheist. So if Bruegel was an atheist, then maybe the bird trap is a cosmic bird trap. And maybe the proof that it's a cosmic bird trap is that the people and the birds in the center of the picture are the same size. This is a painting of mine from about 25 years ago. And I'm introducing this because, like those things that were hidden in the Titian, some of the subject of this is hiding things behind that card. So in a sense, there's this trident down here, this object. You know, you can imagine that there's something back in there shaped rather like that. And then this white card with its own little frame gets to cover it. And what I did was, to create an image, I took the last little bit of the trident here, and I took the void from the trident and the blue space there, and I put them together, made a new image. And this is two paintings. I just wanted to show you how some of these things work. I made the top painting, and that's almost exactly right size. It was about 8 feet. So I made the top painting with these templates that I used for about 10 years. And then I thought, you know, that shelf in there, by the way, this little corner is a lift from a Walt Disney movie. That's from Snow White, right there. So I thought, why don't we use that shelf and put it into a bigger picture, and then imagine that there was a window below it that had the same things in it, but they were linear. So this is the way this picture came about. And this is an amazing painting, I think, on the left. This is a Martin Johnson Heed, who's an American luminist. But he made 2 of these paintings in the 1860s, around the time of the Civil War. And I would argue that this is the beginning, or the earliest painting that's essentially a surrealist painting. Because what you've got here, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, but I'll take it apart a little for you, is you've got this landscape painting here, up on sawhorses, as though it was in the studio, and the water, the fictive water from inside the painting, is dripping out onto the studio floor. I thought that was a great picture. I think he did it as a joke, but, you know, all things sooner or later aren't that funny. This is a painting I made based on that painting, and that's the working drawing that I made for it at that time. This is a fairly recent painting. It's like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's that kind of Martin Johnson Heed idea in a funny way, and it's that card idea from earlier, in that I think what I wanted you to be able to think is that even though this is kind of a standalone icon, like something beyond the back of a World War I German plane or something, I wanted you to understand that even though it could be seen that way as a thing on a white card, almost like a painting on a wall, that it was equally true that you could conduct these lines down and they would complete these forms down here. So that the 2 ways to look at this picture, and this gets back to visual meaning for me, because I think if somebody just looks at this, they can see that it has these 2 readings in it, and those 2 readings, in a sense, are the subject of it. The other subject of it is something that really interests me. You know, everybody goes to restaurants, and the reason I think people pay, among other reasons, they pay a lot of money to go to a restaurant, is so that they don't see the complete circuitry of how things get made in the world. So that everybody goes to a restaurant to not see the prep room of life, if you will. They're really paying for that illusion that this stuff just comes out of nowhere and disappears back into nowhere. And that's worth a lot of money, because the truth isn't like that. So in a sense, the bottom of this painting is the prep room, and the top part of the painting is the restaurant. Oh, let me back up a little. Okay, so I put this in because this was a show I did a couple of years ago, and they had this, this is turning lemon into lemonade, I guess. It had this staircase because this was a stage over here for music. And over the years, I've always made these little paintings of no particular size and just kind of collected them, these little investigations of simple geometries. And I realized that I could hang them, if you will, kind of line them up with that event in this painting so that they all kind of carried across. And I could sort of hang them all on a clothesline there, mental clothesline, and use the stairs as a virtue and have the pictures run up the stairs. So I mention that because we're going to get back to something that's more recent in a minute. Because this guy, Dan Devening, who was down here, I know, the artist Dan Devening, maybe some of you heard his talk. He's also my dealer in Chicago, and the Chicago show is going to use a device not dissimilar from that. By the way, if anything crosses your mind while I'm going along, just ask it. So now I wanted to take you into the studio a little bit. This was a painting that I was making while that show that we just saw in the last slide was on. And at first I thought it was going to be about this mirroring, and it had a simple way to start. It's a little box in the corner, and then you move clockwise, you get it doubles, and it comes down here, it doubles again, it doubles again. And I got it to about here, and my wife said, you know, you've really done things like this so many times, it's really not that interesting. And I thought, it's really not that interesting. And it's never going to be very interesting. So she said, why don't you think, and I really like this idea, she said, why don't you think of this thing in the top as like a tool, like a real object, and imagine what would it do? How could you use it if it was a real thing in the world? So I worked on the painting, and slowly that thing on the top did something that I've frankly always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be able to comment without getting in trouble on the swastika. Because it's such a fantastic graphic, and it's been so ruined by the abuse in the last century that you almost can't touch it anymore. Although it's everywhere. It's in Korea, it's in Japan, it's in American Indians. Because what it basically is, the thing that's so super about it, is it's completely static, and it's completely dynamic. You know, it kind of keeps curling around. So it's an amazing graphic. So that was a way to kind of get at that graphic. The more I manipulated that thing, I thought, ooh, I've almost got a way to kind of make that in here. But the thing my wife had said was what happened at the bottom is that I kind of imagined what that would be like if it was in the world and broken. So the bottom half of that painting is, in a sense, this goes back to the card idea of the other one, there's the idealism, and there's the realism. There's there's National Socialism in theory, there's National Socialism in practice, you know. And this is a curious thing. I was out running, and I found on the road a black bushing that was probably in a suspension system or something. But it was this great little black cube. And I brought it home, and I stuck it on every painting in the room, trying to put it on the top, and finally I copied it because it was too heavy. And I glued it onto the outside of that, which was nice because it got me into this idea, which I'm really fond of. This is sort of like the fiction of a bar, and that's the fact of a bar, so that they kind of connect through there. And that fact and fiction of, or literally doing things or depicting things, is one of the ideas that runs through my work forever. So there's the painting, give you a scale of it in a room when it was finally done. Now this one isn't done at this point, but it again has these little boxes in it. I was trying to make some more versions of that. There's a little sculpture of mine sitting on a chair. Okay, now this gets back to that show that you saw before that had the staircase in it. And I put this in it because I wanted you to get a feel for how big this painting was on the right. And then I want to talk to you a little about what I think is interesting. I think a lot of things are interesting in it, but there's one idea in particular. Okay. What you're looking at on the left there, that's a Manet painting. It's this painting called Kearsage, and it's It's a battle scene painting made roughly during the American Civil War. And the thing that Manet does over and over, and it gets to be something that artists do more and more as time passes, is before modernism, here's the, I got to digress to this hands experiment for you. Before modernism, if you're going to paint those two hands like that, all you do is you paint this whole hand and you paint these fingers. You don't paint this palm. In other words, you don't paint this whole hand, wait for it to dry, and then paint this one over it. You depict it. You show that it would look like that if you had really done it. But the thing that happens with modernism, and it gets back to that cube on the side of the painting and the bar inside, the thing that starts to get to be at issue with early modernism, like in the middle of the 19th century, is they start saying things like, well, what if we didn't just depict things? What if we, to use my term of art, what if we enacted them? What if they really happened? So you did do what I was just saying. You did paint the whole hand first. So what Manet does in his paintings is when he does Jesus, I'll get this just at the end. Is when he's painting this mast and this stuff, if you saw this in person, what's happening here is some of this is painted like little bits and pieces on top of the smoke. That's the depiction. And some of it is an enactment. In other words, he painted the whole thing in, and then he painted smoke over it. So some of it's enacted, and some of it's depicted. And these ideas interest me because they have slightly different outcomes when you use them. So in my painting, this is true of this whole section up here, in that this gray down here, for example, this gray is literally crossing all of that black. There really was a whole big black shape under there, and then this gray violet was painted over it. Whereas right here, that piece of card that you see sticking out is in fact just faked against the edge. That's just depicted. And those two distinctions, like I said, make slightly different and I think interesting outcomes. And the interesting thing about it is what it does is it breaks the illusion. And breaking the illusion can be a really kind of powerful device in making art. So, for example, the playwright Bertolt Brecht invents this thing called alienation. And what alienation is while people are watching the play, he'll basically have someone step in or he'll have someone hold up a card going, I'm in such trouble. So it breaks the spell of the picture. And what he wanted people to do was to be responsible for creating the spell and not just fall under it. So it's, did anybody here see The Cabin in the Woods? The movie? That's a spell breaker. That's a very Brechtian movie, right? Yeah. So this is one of my most recent pictures. I made this like 2 months ago, and has since happily gone on its way to Germany, so I'm really pleased about. I almost can't, I'm happy to say also that I can't really say anything about them anymore. They're just they're just like that. And I think I've figured out how to quiet them down and yet get a lot to happen. So here's another one of the same period. This is also real recent, in the New York studio, propped on a stool, still in progress. Little color samples on the wall. Almost want to say something about that, but I think I won't. It lends itself to, well, I know what I can say about it. No, I will, I'll do this. I was brought up Roman Catholic, and so a lot of the furniture, the mental furniture, so to speak, in my paintings is still, I think, Christian. And when I was done with this painting, I had it's cruciformal for one thing, so it's easy. But the rest of this, these black bits, I kept thinking they felt like blood. They spattered down the picture in a funny way. And I thought, even though I don't practice anymore, I think that's what that painting's about. Which now I'm glad I said that, because it reminds me of something that's important to me. And this happens with my students in New York too. They're always saying, like, I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know what to do. It's like, don't worry. Don't worry where this is going. Just go somewhere. Just do things. Just make a lot of things. Don't worry about them. Every couple of months, maybe kind of bring them all out and think, how's that all make sense? But don't worry about it. The key is just make stuff. Anything crosses your mind, do it. If you walk down the street, here's a really good, and I have to do this to myself all the time too. You walk down the street with a camera, and you see something you want to take a picture of, and you think, who in their right mind takes a picture of that? And you think, well, my friends think, what if somebody saw me take a picture of this? You better take the picture. Because the biggest problem in art making is fear. You don't take that picture, you're in trouble. I'm serious, that is key. Oh, so there it was. That was in its final form, cleaned up. It's another one of the really new ones. And again, it's that thing. I mean, there's something hidden in there. Okay, this is my studio some time back. And I realized where we are in this now. Oh, look at this. This is a tiny version of that one you saw earlier, the one that had the mandala in it, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe you want to call it swastika. It had that kind of swastika form. But I wanted to do like a miniature version of it, or something that talked to it. But anyway, this is the studio in New York, and this is what the work looked like. These are all works on paper, before I came up with the idea about how to organize it for Chicago. And you can see, just looking at it there, I think one was taken down, but you get a rough idea. They were just like, it's like art on the wall. And it wasn't, I messed with this idea for about a month. And what I was trying to do was get the art, get the installation to tell you something about how to read the work. So one of the key ideas for me, really, it's like, I guess it's the bedrock idea, is this notion, as I mentioned earlier, about visual meaning, is visuality. I'm very interested in finding out to what degree an image can sustain itself just on its appearance, that it doesn't need a whole lot of other support material that validates it. Now, I'm on the wrong side of history at the moment with this, because the dominant pedagogy is to have as much support material and as little imagery as possible. I mean, the Whitney right now, which looks like a science fair, has got little experiments all over and these giant wall texts and precious little to actually just like look at. So I'm still I'm for visuality. I'm for the looking at process, because I still think it's crucial, and I think it hasn't been completely done away with, despite the fact that these curators would have us think differently. So what I wanted to do was see if I could organize these in a way that told the viewer that without a wall text, but something in the actual appearance. Let me go forward here. And this is what I came up with. See, you know what's interesting? You realize that's that chair. I have the same design within reach chairs that you have in your school right here. So I'm on the same wavelength as SCAD here in the chair department. So what I wanted to do, here's the way this will work. At Devenings in the fall, when these are up, you'll come into a room that's about sort of like the width of this stage, actually, and maybe not unlike the length of this stage. I think it's close, actually. The room is a little over 30 by a little over 12, so this is like that. And there's a door at the end. So you come into the room, and there'll be big pictures on both walls, and they'll run down to the end wall, and they'll literally get smaller and smaller. So I have had people in New York to see this. You don't get quite the effect in New York because you can step back. But everybody notices this, and when it was written about recently, that was the observation that was made in print, is what this does is it reminds you that you're looking at things. And the looking at is sort of, that's my business. Oh, there it is. That was it. Good. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to... Oh, God, yes, I'd love to do the video. Is it there? Oh, great, because this video is a video I made about covering... Oh, there it is. Let's check this out. We have sound? You don't need much sound. The sound is minimal in this anyway. It's the world's worst tracking shot. So I love that idea that instead of the tracking shot, which is all about revelation, it's like, let's follow that person through the parking lot. Just like you lock on something and you never see them. Okay, so that's it. Yep.
Are you interested in Gestalt theory at all?
Yeah, particularly Gestalt perception. Absolutely. What makes you say that? But you're right, but what makes you say it?
Well, I guess I just felt like the lines in your paintings just inherently connected at some point.
Right. You're absolutely right. Gestalt perception, in some degree, comes out of Cézanne. Because Cézanne is the first person to say, the painting isn't out there complete. It's a discourse between, it's a co-construction of the object in the world and the viewer. And the way in which you get that made really clear is through Gestalt perception. Because Gestalt perception is where you see for the first time that thing that you all know, where you'll see like a series of dashes, and your eye sees a curve. There's no curve. But it'll jump in because it's actively constructing the world as you move through it. And that idea of the active construction of vision as opposed to the passive consumption of images is key to me, huge. And it gets to agency, it gets to responsibility, it gets to who gets pushed around by the state, it gets really big if you think about it. So that's a great question. Thanks. Yeah.
You mentioned that the viewer, what is it? Let's see here. By looking at those works, it reminds the viewer that they're looking. What do you think's revealed by the perceiver perceiving themselves?
I think that funnily links onto his question. Because what I think it does is it wakes the viewer up from the usual relationship to the work of art of voyeur, where they just kind of look into it and they don't have any sense that they have any agency. So the whole point of the reason I mentioned Bertolt Brecht as well, Brecht, Cézanne, Gestalt perception, they're all about trying to bring the viewer to the awareness that they have responsibility or that they've already made decisions by looking at things. So I think it's like that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
You talked about...
Could we bring this group of lights down a little? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go on. Could I talk a little about
you
what?
talked about just having no fear and just going at the world for the sake of your art.
Yeah.
What's the most ridiculous thing that you've ever done in the sake of your art?
Oh, easy. Well, I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's a grab bag. I mean, I'll tell you one place I got my work to at a point where it was right after, remember the one in there that had the templates in it, the pink ribbon that floated in the window? About a year after that, that ribbon started to become something that would support other things, but they would all be linked like that. But they became more like objects and less like a turned line. And at one point, they turned into hot dogs. And I thought to myself, dear God, don't have this be interesting to me, because this is such a terrible idea. And within one or two watercolors of it, it had gone its way. But that's a pretty good example, I think. Was that embarrassing enough? Okay. No, that's enough. Okay. Yeah.
How do you pick your color?
Oh, as color is a funny thing. My color tends, here's what I'm not good at. I'm not good at, in the usual sense, abstract color. I like it when I see it. When people just kind of arrange things interestingly. I think, oh, that's interesting. But I can't really assign things that way because I'm too sort of grounded in objects, I guess. So for me, they have to be worldly associative. So like that last painting, or one of the last ones, the yellow and blue one, the thing that was so great for me about that is I got to put down this yellow wall, if you would, of slats, and then paint that soft blue thing on top of it. But also because of the associations of blue, it wanted to punch a hole through the thing. So it kind of sat up on it and punched through at the same time. And since I was 5, when I read The Prince's Dessert, where the prince asks for a hot and cold dessert at the same time, and they finally go through a lot of failures, and they finally come up with hot fudge sundae, and they give it to him, he's happy. I've loved the idea that you would do things that were problematic in that way. That would be, it's under, it's over. It's here, it's there. Because again, I think it goes back to this other question. If I can get the viewer to realize that they don't have a complete thing in front of them, but that they're choosing things, that they're saying, no, I say it's like this. I don't mean to disparage this woman that worked for me years ago, but I had this woman who would clean my studio. And she said to me one day, oh, look, Gary, you painted a dog. And I said, no, Sonia, you've seen a dog, but it's not a dog. It's what you've made. And she said, Gary, you paint a dog. And I thought, I'm really not going to get into this. I said, so I have. And we let it go at that. But for people who have been through this process, you do get to a point where you can begin to realize that the world isn't just as you find it, which I thought when I was in high school. I said, it's like that because it's like that. And it wasn't until literally my second year of college when I thought, oh, you mean this is just my point of view? Oh, God. And that's, I think, when this idea started to really work on me, of building things. So I've never kind of gotten over that college revelation, So I think the work is still very much about that. In fact, I know it is. Excuse me? Oh, it's, people always get asked that question. The question was, what am I reading right now? And somebody said recently, they said, I always ask people what they're reading, and if what they're reading isn't interesting, I think they can't be very interesting. So I thought, oh God, I hope no one asked me that question. Because here's what I read every single day. I read it on the plane today. I had it all with me. I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal cover to cover. That's what I read. I don't read any theory. I don't read ever about art, except if it's me. If I'm mentioned, I'm pretty fascinated. But everything else, I think, whatever, you know. But, yeah, I tried to read a book a year or so ago on, I've never been a book reader. I read a little science fiction when I was in college. And I don't know. But I'm great at newspapers. I can go through tons of facts and pack them away and then recombine them. So I think they become sort of like raw material for me to make ideas. Is I'll hear things. What was the thing I saw in the newspaper today? It was so curious. I know what it was. It was just like a little tiny thing like this, but I thought, that's big. They said, for a combination of reasons, and they listed them, they said some was budgetary, some was bad design, some was just failed launches. America is in danger of losing its ability to predict the weather. That all the weather satellites are either really old and they can't get new ones up in time. And I thought, well, that's an interesting problem, isn't it? When all of a sudden the 5-day forecast on the evening news is like, it's back to the old thing with chalkboards, you know, because they don't have the radar maps, you know. So I don't think it's going to come to that, but that was today's paper.
We have a question in the balcony.
Ah,
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is, you know that example you gave with the expensive restaurants?
yes.
So do you make your art about the illusion that we have on how the food is made? Like, is that what you basically do?
No, it's not so much how food is made. It's the way in which we all try to go through the world, or not all of us certainly, but many of us try to go through the world trying to buffer ourselves from the full system. So nobody wants to look at the whole system. They want to look at the good parts. So the restaurant is just a unique, it's a nice example of framing out the part of the system you like. The way gated communities work. I mean, gated communities basically frame out the part of reality you like, and it just drops the rest out. And you pay good money for that. A lot of things in life, people pay serious money to avoid the system. That's how it's used. Yep.
Apropos paying serious money to avoid the system, I find what's most radical and enlightening about your work is that here you are using a completely abstract idiom and telling us more about reality than any realistic painting could.
You want to write my catalog next? That was great. That was right on point.
You're great.
Thanks a lot. You got the job. No, that really was, because I think also what I was trying to point out was that that distinction, it's not like a watertight compartment, like over here's representation, over here's abstraction. You could almost, in fact, this would be a funny thing to do as a talk, do the rheostat from Van Eyck to Barnett Newman, and just fill in all of the art that would get you slowly but surely until you came out at Barnett Newman. And you could do it. I mean, you just keep, like you get, at some point you'd get to Hopper, and you'd say, hey, it's kind of thinning down over here at Hopper compared to some earlier interiors. By the time you get to Hopper, you got some pretty abstract interiors. And you just push it a little further and you say, oh, look at that, And you could just walk it down. So, appreciate that.
Thank you, Gary.
Pleasure.